right. Welcome to those that are joining. We're going to give it a couple more minutes because it sounded like the registration for the Zoom link may have been a little wonky. But if you can go ahead and scan the QR code that's on the screen. Melissa will also be putting in the chat, we'll put a link to this survey. While we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind just completing that survey would be great. We'll use this during the presentation today virtually. So.
Morning, everybody.
Hey, Logan.
Good morning.
I've got my camera off. My connection's not super stable, so I'm hoping this helps.
No worries. I thought I recognized that voice. Right. Melissa, I'm kind of looking at you and we'll get started when you think that the waiting room gets lessened.
All right. Well, I've been letting folks in as they join. So I think whenever you're ready, Paul.
Sounds good. And so before we get started, just those of you that are just signing on the screen as well as in the chat is a link to a survey that we'll be using throughout this presentation. So if you don't mind scanning the QR code on your screen or using that chat in the survey would be great. We'll use that throughout this presentation. I'd also note to the YDD staff as we're getting and seeing how many people are going to sign on to this call, we'll make a determination on how many breakout rooms we'll use at that final section here just before we do it. So stay tuned, YDD staff, on that one. With that, Brian, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you since I'm just the random person talking right now, and I'll introduce myself after a bit.
Not a random person. Well, welcome and thank you to all who've joined for today's community conversation. My name is Brian Detman. For the record, I'm the Youth Development Oregon Director. We appreciate your taking the time. Just want to put a quick and important shout out to Paul and to Melissa and to Bill and Jared and Cord, and I think Sally's on as well. Maybe some additional YDO staff who've all in one way, shape, or form been contributing to this pretty, I don't know, for us as a roughly dozen-person agency, a pretty big, large-scale community engagement effort. This is the 11th conversation. The first 10 we did were all in person in various places around the state. We weren't able to make it to every place or region. We've used this regional solutions map that actually designates, I think, a dozen regions. I think we're actually probably in each of close to each of those regions. But certainly there were places and communities we weren't able to get to for the community conversations, but our staff, our grant managers, again, many of whom are on the call, have been visiting grantees and actually doing additional outreach, which started in the spring, probably winter, frankly, of 2022 into the spring and early summer. So we've been all across the state, back and forth, sometimes to places 2 or 3 times, and just appreciate you're taking the time this morning to hear this presentation. Some of you may have even been at one of our in-person community conversations. So we welcome you, those of you coming back. We're gonna spend roughly a couple of hours together. We've tried to adjust our presentation that we were doing in person to this Zoom kind of on virtual format. So a few little tweaks you'll see for those who may have attended in person. But again, thanks for being here. Thanks, Paul, for all the work and putting together the presentation and kind of leading this effort. I don't know, that's the quick intro. Paul, what do we want to do next? Do you want to, I see people are joining. Do you want to say another word or two about the QR code?
Yes, so if you haven't scanned the QR code, I'll go back, sorry. Working on multiple screens. So the QR code as well as a link into that survey is in the chat from Melissa. We'll be using that during this presentation. So just kind of jumping into the meat of the presentation. As Brian said, my name is Paul Sell. I'm the Re-engagement Systems Manager, and I've had the pleasure of help leading this work of this outreach over the past few months. So thank you again for joining us today. Just really quickly, judging on the size of the room, I think what I'd like to do is have YDO staff introduce themselves really quickly and why they're doing that. If you don't mind, if you are a participant joining us in the chat, just put your name and your organization. We'll get us started with that. And then, so as we do those introductions on the screen, just a couple of things to note, and then I'll turn it over to YDO staff for introductions. Is if you don't mind being muted, just helps on that side because you do have all the features of Zoom available to you. Also, feel free to take advantage of the reaction and raise hand functions on your screen. I would tell you where that is. It should be down on the bottom to the right, but I am sharing my screen, so mine looks different. And then also please utilize the chat so you can see that people are dropping their name and their organization. We'll also do a breakout here just momentarily, but YDO staff, myself, will be monitoring the questions and other comments throughout the presentation. So we'll try to address them as we move along with that. Again, as informal as you can make a virtual presentation, so we're trying to make that as just welcoming, and feel free to ask questions and join in as it seems fit on that. And then with that, we will be, other note, we will be using a couple different breakouts throughout this option. And so Melissa will be the master of ceremonies, so to speak, for this work, and be pulling you back within that. But I'll turn it over to Jared for an introduction. And then Jared, if you don't mind calling on another YDO staff on the screen, just for a quick introduction would be great.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Jared Shaw, Grant Manager and Workforce Policy Analyst. Thank you for being here with us today. I'll turn it to Melissa.
Thank you, Jared. Melissa Gallardo, I'm the Executive Assistant for YDO. And yeah, also happy to be here today and happy to see all of you. Cord, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Cord Bucher. I'm the Deputy Director here at Youth Development Division, and I will pass it over to Bill.
Good morning. I'm Bill Hansel, Grant Manager, Data Guy, and I'll pass it to Sally.
Hi, I'm Sally Deck, and it looks like my video is having a little bit of an issue here, but I am Grant Manager with YDO as well. And I will pass it to Bill. Oh no, Bill passed it to me. I'll pass it to Jared.
Nope, I went. Who's left?
I think Joy is on this call.
Hi everyone, my name is Joy. I'm the Administrative Specialist, and it's great to meet you all.
I think that looks like everybody from the YDO staff are on there.
Did we hear from Molly? I think her camera's
Oh,
on.
Molly, sorry about that.
Hi, Molly Burns, Grant Manager, Re-engagement Team. I'll be listening in today. Thanks everyone for coming.
All right, awesome. And I realized looking on the screen, I forgot to note, feel free, you can stay on camera. It's nice to see people's faces, but also understand that bandwidth and those other options. So don't feel like you have to stay on screen if you would prefer to not be there. So with that, I believe, Brian, you're next up. Oh, Brian, just to note, I can't get the notes for some reason right now. So you're going to have to monitor the notes from your side.
That's fine. Well, I think I can do that. Great. Again, thanks for being here. Thanks to staff. It's great to see you, Molly. Great to see you, Joy. I'm glad to have the two of you. They've also made really important contributions to the organization of this effort as staff people. So And I don't know if we've got any Youth Development Council members. I haven't had a chance to kind of scroll through all the names. But just know that, and you'll hear actually a little bit about this in this slide. As I said, just at the top, but a quick reminder, we're going to go through a few slides and just some introductory kind of background and context, just so everybody has the same bit information about the Youth Development Oregon and our work and some the sort of breadth of what we do. We'll talk a bit about our investments and the budget, and that will really begin the point where we are focused in on some feedback that we're going to want to hear from you, and we'll do some breakout sessions around that. So just sit back. We try not to take too long in this part, and in fact, I'll probably speak pretty quickly since we're well, actually, we're only 15 minutes in, but we want to get to that interactive piece. And then throughout the presentation, there are a few points where Paul's going to pick up with providing some data from the survey that we had posted early, and we'll bring another slide up here in a moment with a QR code to that survey. So if you are just coming on, you'll have another opportunity to do the survey, and we'll provide some of the information that we're getting from the survey. So quick overview. You've probably heard us refer to, oh great, Melissa, you're putting a link in the chat. So for those who are just logging on, there's a link in the chat to that survey. Feel free to jump to that and then answer the questions. We'll cover some of the questions kind of toward the end that will require a little bit more writing. We actually would encourage you to spend some more time on those, but the kind of quick multiple choice answers, we'll love to see your responses to those. And I just a question in the chat, are you requesting that you do the survey while on the call? Yes, please feel free to respond right now. It shouldn't take you too long to do the multiple choice options in the survey. So that's my quick response. If Melissa or somebody else wants to provide any more detail, but it shouldn't take you too long, so feel free to do it while you're listening to me. So who we are, you've heard staff and even myself, and you will continually hear us sometimes refer to ourselves as the Youth Development Division. If you see the backgrounds on our slides, many of our backgrounds have our Youth Development Division logo. One of the things that we are transitioning to, in particular for conversations like today and for initiatives and activities like this, is to really refer to the combined work of the council and the division. And so you'll hear us using this term, this sort of umbrella term of Youth Development Oregon. And again, it represents the work that our council and division are doing together and jointly. You will see references in some of our email communication and written communication to the council when it's particularly focused on our council, which is our governing body, which actually was established first as the Oregon Commission on Children and Families was dissolved. So you will hear references to YDC or Youth Development Council. In fact, I saw Sam Coe log on. He's one of our Youth Development Council members, and there are probably a few others that I may be missing. So understand that the council, again, is our overarching governing body, governor appointed kind of stakeholders, practitioners, advocates. And the division technically is our staff. You had a chance to hear introductions from many of our staff. We're a dozen, 13 all told, and we work with the staff of the division. And then again, as I mentioned, there's work that we do in concert and trying to sort of reduce the confusion around YDD or YDC, came up with this idea of Youth Development Oregon, and we'll be using that in a lot of sort of that public, external facing communications and initiatives. So we'll make some mistakes along the way. You'll see some slides that even say YDD, so just bear with us, but we wanted to tell you a little bit about that shift. Next slide. So why we're here, from our standpoint, this was actually an initiative that Governor Brown encouraged all state agencies to really engage with stakeholders and partners and the 9 federally recognized tribes around their budget or some aspect of their budget. So that as we're going into the as Governor Brown's term is coming to an end at the end of this calendar year, and as we move into a legislative session, which will begin in kind of winter, spring of 2023, that it would be helpful for stakeholders, taxpayers, voters, families, et cetera, to be aware of agency budgets and specific agency initiatives. It feels like this is coming out of COVID, coming out of wildfires, coming out of larger conversations around justice and racial equity. There's a real opportunity to engage in some new ways, whether it's in person or virtually, but also to talk about and sort of pull the curtains back a little bit on agency budgeting and agency budget process. So we're excited to share a bit about our community investments, because that is an aspect of our budget that is pretty flexible, and in fact actually was born out of community engagement and community conversation about 8 or 9 years ago. We want to share a little bit about our mission, vision, and work, so you kind of have that. We're interested in learning from you. That's why we're doing this survey, so that we can understand who's here and present. We did, as I said, 10 other in-person conversations around the state. Just got a chance to learn what's happening on the ground, what the issues are. We spoke with adults. We had some specific conversations and meetings with young people that sometimes were often outside of the actual community conversation meeting, but had dedicated space for young people. And we're interested in hearing if there are other youth advisory groups or youth groups of one kind or another, tribal youth councils, et cetera, where we could engage more in the near and longer term. So if you have ideas about that, we're eager to hear. And then that's really segues into that last bullet around, what are opportunities for other engagement? Again, whether it's directly with youth, or if you've got a regional group that gets together, or a place where you think either myself or one of our staff can attend either in person or virtually. We may not be able to get everywhere in the next month or two, but over the course of this next biennium, I think it will be really, it's important to us to have have local knowledge and some local on the ground presence, and so we look forward to ongoing engagement. Next slide, Paul. All right, Paul, do you want to take over?
Yeah. So in just a moment, you're going to be randomly assigned into breakout rooms of 3, I believe. I'm just checking with Melissa that we're going into 3-ish breakout rooms. And when you're in there, we want to give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself. You may have a YDO staff in there, you may not. So this is an unhosted breakout room. And Melissa, we're going to transition, and she'll share this slide in the breakout rooms as well. But while you're in there, if you can just introduce yourself, including your name, organization, your location of services. So where in Oregon are you doing offering primary services for youth, and the type of services provided, just to give a brief networking opportunity for all of you on the call. And then we also like to just kind of get the conversation started with a few sentence starters. So you can see if you want to just answer one of the following sentence starters down there around how does YDO connect to your work, an important takeaway for you today, maybe something around YDO needs to know about your community, or something YDO should consider for future events like this, both in person and virtual. So with that, I'm going to look at Melissa, I think, because you're going to take us away to breakout rooms. And
I was going to take us away. I thought we were going to do the poll questions first.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry. I totally forgot. I don't have my notes in front of me. So we're going to actually quickly put a poll on the screen for you. And so if you don't mind just answering those polls, there's 2 of them, and we'll share those results when we get back from the breakout room. And the regional solutions area of Oregon, if you don't know which one you are technically in, I would just select the one that you think you're closest to or best represents the area in which you're at. Man, people are taking polls fast. That's fun to watch. All right.
Hey, Paul, this is Logan Garner.
Hey, Logan. Yes.
For regional solutions area, I don't see North Coast or one that would fit that. Should I just go ahead and click on sure?
You can do unsure, but I think it's technically the Valley North Coast is the.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'll take it. All right, thank you.
There you go. Sold. All right. So Melissa, when you're ready, I'd say go ahead and kick us off to it, and I'm going to stop sharing screen.
All right. I clicked open all rooms. And it says that it's in progress. I hope that folks are going to be going into rooms.
I have a note of 39 unassigned currently.
Let's see here.
We just want to give people another moment to complete their poll. So we're doing good.
Okay.
I also just noticed while Melissa's taking care of that, we are recording this just so that we can either post this information. We'll probably post this online for this presentation so that people who weren't able to join us today can access it. But just a note that we are recording this time.
Just behind the curtains note, I'm closing the rooms because it didn't look like anyone was going into the room. So I'm trying to figure out how to get you all into the breakout rooms. Bear with me.
All right. Also, Melissa, while you're working on that, I can just share the community conversation poll. It looks like most people have entered it. So it looks like there's been quite a few people on the call, about just over 11 that have been able to join us in person. So be interested in your feedback as we've adjusted, obviously, in person to virtual. So I appreciate you for joining us again. We have about 12 people that were not able to join us or didn't register, and then also about 7 that registered but weren't able to attend. We did run into some weather when we were down in Southern Oregon for sure. So appreciate you joining us today. And then the regional solutions, it looks like we are actually quite evenly dispersed from around Oregon. Southern Oregon has about 9 people. That's where we ran into some weather. So appreciate those that joining us today that weren't able to join us because of weather. And then Metro, we have, again, probably about our second largest group with that. So appreciate that survey. All right. So maybe, Melissa, if it's not working great, then we can go ahead and bump forward on that.
Well, I am moving folks into rooms.
Oh,
so
perfect. Sounds good. I wasn't sure. I couldn't see on the
Sorry,
screen what was happening.
they're
No, you're
slowly
good.
disappearing into breakout rooms. It's just taking a little bit longer.
All right. So Melissa, let's probably do about 3.5 minutes in the
Okay.
breakout rooms when we get
Okay.
people assigned then, please.
Thanks.
Hi, Heidi. I see you just joined the meeting. I admitted you are our meeting manager at the moment is getting everyone assigned to breakout rooms. So thanks for joining us. I think you'll be assigned to a breakout room with some other participants in a moment.
Hello, Matt. Thanks for joining us. I just moved everyone into breakout rooms, so this looks like a very
Hi, sorry.
no, no. I'm glad to have you here. I am just going to pop you into a breakout room where
Thank
folks
you.
are just introducing themselves, and there are some questions that they're answering. So let's see here. Um, here.
All right, appreciate everybody going into the breakout rooms. Hopefully hopefully it was useful and you got an opportunity to meet some people. I know I enjoyed my conversation with a couple folks from around the state. Brian, kind of an interesting time. We probably maybe want to just keep rolling through. Again, we want this to be a networking piece too. So feel free to use the chat. There's direct messaging accessible to all of you. So if there's somebody that you're like, oh, I want to connect with, make sure to use that behind the scenes direct messaging in the app for us on that. But Brian, I'll turn it back to you. And just verifying, can you see my screen?
I can. Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. Oops. There we go.
All right. So back to some of this more background. And as I said, we'll get through this pretty quickly. Not going to read this to you verbatim, but just a few things to point out. For those who are aware of kind of the almost a continuum of supports and services for young people around sort of education and learning. You've got the early learning. Now it's its own independent agency, kind of supporting young people from 0 to 5 or 6. I think it's probably through 5 years old, close to 6. And then our work kind of comes in. So our work does support after school programs and school-based, sometimes school-based programs and initiatives, and certainly services and supports for young people who are at risk of becoming disconnected or are disconnected from school. Some of our work supports summer programs and after school programs and evening programs and work supporting teens and young adults. So it's a pretty wide ranging, our statute and our age range is pretty broad. So just wanted you to understand that. And then these values, equitable access, equal opportunity, youth-centered approaches and results, inclusion and innovation, all really are kind of the foundation of the grant making work, the policy work. This will come up actually a little bit later in the presentation as we talk kind of at least at a more conceptual level about how our grants are meant to impact communities. So just be thinking about those values and the values that are either shared with your organization or agency or maybe things that may be different. But we had a strategic planning process that we concluded last year, but was an important strategic planning process to kind of codify this mission, this vision, and these values. I had a lot of input from different stakeholders and partners. So just wanted to make sure you were introduced to that. If I'm not mistaken, Melissa or Paul may be able to make available a kind of 2-page PDF that has some background on Youth Development Oregon. It has on it the mission, vision, values, and kind of overview of our work. And then on the backside, some more specific information about our grant programs and initiatives. So I don't know if we're going to pop a link to the PDF in the chat or how exactly we want to do that, but just be aware that we do have a 2-page document that we can make available that has a lot of this information on it, so you can have access to it. I don't know, Melissa, do you want to make a comment?
I will share that as soon as I can. Thank you.
Sweet.
We're arranging
Yeah.
our breakout rooms for the next.
Are you? Totally
Yeah.
makes
Thank
sense.
you.
Thanks,
And-
Melissa. I
and
know you're
Brian.
going to Paul.
I had just asked, and Jared is behind the scenes. Someone asked about the slides themselves. So Jared's going to be pulling it into a PDF for us behind the scenes. So it'll be coming shortly. For people can have access to that as well.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jared. Next slide. So just an overview here of our work. I think many of you know us through our grant making, different grants for kind of different programs, but we administer about $35 million in grant resources, grant and aid resources over a 2-year period. Again, we'll talk more specifically about the community investment grants because that is our largest grant area and the place where we're really seeking your input and questions. We also do policy work for the staff, it's really policy implementation and policy education, right? Talking about the work we're doing in re-engagement, which is funded through the Student Success Act, talking about juvenile justice related work, which is both funded through juvenile crime prevention, state dollars, but also some federal Title II dollars, statewide youth re-engagement, which I mentioned earlier, coming out of legislation, but now we're moving into a new biennium. So we're hoping that the legislature passes additional resources for re-engagement to help reconnect young people to school and graduation or GED, and then some kind of pathway around work and career. We have work that we do in compliance monitoring, which is really around, it's juvenile justice related and is a federally funded agency. We have responsibilities around ensuring safety of young people in facilities and in the kind of law enforcement realm. So that's something that maybe not a lot of people know, but we do have some responsibilities around monitoring facilities and monitoring for implementation of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, which is a federal act. And then cross-agency collaboration, I think, is real important to zero in on. That's the work between agencies, with Oregon Youth Authority or with the Health Authority or with the Department of Education. Those are all important agency partners of ours. And I don't know, Youth Development Oregon is, we consider ourselves kind of small and mighty, right? Just about 12, 13 staff. But our work, I think, is most impactful when we're able to align and partner with other organizations that, you know, may have a few more staff and have larger budgets, and also for us to identify gaps and barriers that some of those systems have, and we can help, because of community voice and youth voice, you know, begin to solve some of those challenges that a bigger system may be aware of, but may not always have the kind of eyes on, so to speak, on the ground as we do, because of the community-based organizations and advocates that we're able to be connected to. So that's a little bit about our work. Obviously, the technical assistance work through advising organizations is there too. Don't worry about it, Paul. You can move to the next. I'll turn it to you.
All right. So thank you, Brian, for kind of that update on it. I apologize, you see me looking at multiple screens. I'm trying to pull that PDF into chat as well. So that is coming shortly on that flyer that Brian was talking about. But as we are moving in through this conversation, wanted to make sure that we showed some of the, why is that not exact? There we go. Want to show some of the survey results within that work. And so let me make this a little bit bigger here. Why is that not? All right. So you can see the different counties that are here, but really wanted to share a little bit of information around who's in this conversation. You can see a large percentage of program management and staff supervision, as well as combined management and direct service roles in this
Hey,
work.
Paul, can you make it bigger? Can you,
let me
on your
see here.
screen, maybe pull it out just with your fingers? I don't know.
No, it's not on my touch screen here.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Let's see. Why is it not? Oh, there we go. They're gonna let me zoom in. No,
It's triple dots on the top right by the web. Yeah, that one.
oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Ah, cool. I just learned something. Thank you. I don't know who jumped on the call. I appreciate that. All right. So you can see here that we have that program staff as well as frontline workers or combined management staff in that. And I would say in the conversations we've had in person, it's been very similar, as well as some executive leadership in the room in these conversations. Scrolling down, you can see here, how would you describe your area of service? We have quite a bit of the rural joining us today. And I noticed that in some of those signing, some of those areas that people were recognizing of the service areas that they have within that. Just a note here, we actually didn't add a definition, because one of the things that we're trying to understand and allow flexibility within our grant making processes is to really have that language in there of to serve the community in which it is. So we didn't add a definition to this because we want to understand your perspective from the community on the areas in which you're serving in that work. Again, a good distribution of it. The Frontier does not look like we had anybody from some of those very rural areas with very small population density in that work. Moving down to this last one that we'll show just in this first breakout is we have quite a few people on the call that have current YDD funding, and I would say that's actually probably higher than we've seen in the in-person ones. So do appreciate everybody joining us that are current grantees on that work, but also then we have a percentage of people that were not currently funded by us on that work. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back to sharing that slide deck here. Get to the right slot here. There we go. So Brian, I know we're kind of trying to move through it, but didn't know if anybody had any big ahas. I saw a couple things come in the chat, so I'll check in with that here in just a second as well. But Brian, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think you appreciate folks answering those survey questions. If you're still wanting to answer questions or just joined, you should stay, keep working on it. We're going to gather all this data, and as a part of our kind of summary and next steps presentation, which we'll do in January, we'll kind of assemble it all and be able to kind of give you the report out in aggregate. So know that we'll take responses into that. I did see a question about wanting to kind of see who was attending from Eastern Oregon. I guess I got two ideas. One is you may be able to scroll back in the chat and kind of see, because we asked everybody at the beginning to sort of say who or where they're from, but it's also fine with me if there are particular folks who are from Eastern Oregon who want to just add their names and organizations back in the chat, just to allow it looks like Karen Wagner to kind of see who's in the room. You're free to have that come out in the chat. That's probably the way to make that happen. I don't know, Paul, if you have other ideas, but you know, folks can just throw their names in and let you know who's there.
Absolutely, I'd encourage that to just reach out directly to, it looks like Karen Wagner.
Exactly.
So if you're in Eastern Oregon area, please reach out to her during that side on it. Perfect.
Yeah.
And I do see that Jared posted the YDO presentation. That's the slide deck we're using currently. We also will be posting that the handout that we've used here momentarily as well.
Perfect, Paul. So we will move to community investment model. So if there were any comments or questions, as Paul said at the beginning, feel free to just drop them in the chat, or if there was a particular piece you wanted to highlight, piece of information, or just an observation around who's in attendance, just throw it in the chat, and that way we can all kind of see if there were any thoughts, and if there's any other questions, we'll be monitoring the chat. So onto the community investment model. As I mentioned, this is our specific area of grant making, and we just want to talk a little bit about that. And as we move here kind of toward the second half of our presentation, this is where we're going to have some breakouts and want feedback. So just a quick little overview. Go ahead, Paul. You were right. You did it perfectly. The budget for our community investments is roughly 15 million, right? Just slightly shy of 15 million. And those are pretty flexible dollars. On the, if I'm not mistaken, yes, there's the overview. Paul just dropped the overview in the chat right on time. On that PDF, the front side kind of has overview, mission, vision, values, some kind of high level explanations of our work. And then on the other side is more specific information about our grants. And it is there that you'll see, I think at the top of that second page, our community investment grants. And then that's broken up into 3 different initiatives. Once I kind of hit this, Paul might say a few words about those initiatives, but I'll just hit the kind of main information on this slide. The other areas of grant and aid funding we administer our juvenile crime prevention funds. I think this is a combination of both state funds and our federal dollars, but our state funds are awarded to awarded through formula to counties and tribes, all 36 counties and the 9 federally recognized tribes. And then also, again, I mentioned we've got some federal dollars, Title II dollars from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And again, those support, preventing kids from either touching the juvenile justice system or preventing them from kind of penetrating more deeply, perhaps after a first offense or some minor offense of some kind. So there are dollars we have for juvenile justice, Future Ready Oregon, relatively new legislation passed in the short session here in 2022 to support work programs for youth, particularly paid work experience. So like student internships, things like that. Some of you may be Future Ready Oregon funded either from YDO or from the Higher Education Coordinating Council or from the Bureau of Labor and Industries, right? There's a fair amount of dollars, a large amount of dollars that is going out through this Future Ready legislation, which totaled, $200 million. We've got about the 3.3 this biennium, are hoping that the legislature approves another 7 million or so in dollars for Future Ready. And then youth re-engagement, I've mentioned that a couple of times. That's to support reconnecting young people who have dropped out, been pushed out, have for whatever reason become disconnected from school and education, back to that system, recover credits, get on track to a GED and a diploma, and also be thinking beyond to whatever may come next, a pre-apprenticeship, career, or post-secondary school. I mean, whatever that might be, want to ensure that young people are back on track. We also administer a, Paul, something's come, oh, that's the PDF. I see the PDF, Paul. Maybe you meant to put that up. I kind of, but it's covering the slide, Paul. Yep. The community schools is a legacy grant program that YDO administers. It's not a ton of money, but it does make a difference for 5 different schools across the state who are awarded $20,000 grants. There's no process. We just sort of pass those dollars through to community schools. Again, 5 of them. I won't name all the locations just out of the interest of time, but wanted to be fully transparent to show you all of our grant and aid dollars, which total, as I said, about $34 million. So that's the quick overview. Paul, do you want to say a word or two about the PDF? Great.
I can. Is it showing, Brian, now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So apologize. It looked like when it converted to PDF, it kind of went formatting wise. We will send a updated version that is nice and pretty, follow-up email to this conversation. But the first page you can see here is the mission and vision. This QR code here takes you to our website to see all of our information with it. A couple of things to kind of point out here is the presenters. So you can see both Brian's and my name here, as well as our contact information. We are the ones that have been traveling mainly throughout the state to do these conversations. So if you have a question, need information, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We promise that if we can't get back to you, we will have somebody from the staff get back to you on that and engage in those with that. The second page is what I wanted to pull up to talk a little bit more about that budget. You can see the formatting here is a little incorrect for some reason, but these 4 initiatives I have on the screen currently are our community investment grants. And these are have been approved by our council to move forward with as our 2023-25 biennium RFA process. So youth grants is our largest, kind of most versatile grant that we have. It's focused on supporting existing youth development programs around that work. We don't quite have the total amounts of what's going to be available for that yet. That'll be released with our RFA release later in this winter. Youth Solutions is one of those grants that we really like to advertise as that new and innovative programming. So they have different data reporting requirements around the services that you provide. It can be used for limited duration, so like those summer programs that you might offer. It also can be used for system change and other opportunities that you're using to really change the focus of the work, and may have some challenges in reporting individual student data within that. As Brian alluded to, this workforce readiness grant is really our workforce focus. And so it does not have to have all the elements that Future Ready may need. So the big difference with this grant versus our Future Ready grants is this grant does not require paid internships or other direct supports for youth going into employment. So if you're doing some entry-level work with that workforce, it's important to note we do have our grant managers that manage that on the call today too. So if you have more questions on any of these grants, feel free to put it into chat and a grant manager will jump on board with that. And as Brian said, our re-engagement grants, opportunity grants, the re-engagement opportunity grants are very focused on services for youth. So providing that direct support to re-engage youth back into education and post-secondary options. The collaborative grant will be a shift in the 23-25 biennium, focused really on that collaborative effort in a specific service area, bringing organizations together to expand youth services community and service area wide versus just that direct service within that work. And then you can see the Future Ready, again, that main focus on paid internships is one of the differences with those other grants on that. So I'm going to close that screen. Hopefully it takes me back to the slideshow. Yes, Brian, are we back to the slideshow? Oh, and also very important to note that I forgot before closing that, down on the bottom, if you have not signed up for our YDD listserv or our Gov delivery system, that is where all of our RFA information is released and those other things on that. So please do take advantage of that. That link is on our website as well. All right.
Thank you, Paul. And there was one other grant area skipped over. I'm sure not intentionally. There was the youth violence prevention grants too, another specific grant area within our community investments. So just be aware of that for those who do that focused work. So community informed grant making, just note, I said this at the beginning that the community investments were really born out of conversations like we're having today and other in-person conversations around creating a grant model that would really be sensitive to community needs and goals. So we're excited to kind of continue in that tradition and want to use almost the rest of our remaining time kind of getting, or at least the next section of time, getting your feedback. So Paul, will you move to the next slide? Just as a kind of conceptual piece, I made some allusions to this around built on a set of kind of shared values around the importance of youth development and understanding of brain science. We're excited to be an organization kind of supporting you through the resources we have, financial and technical assistance, and and even in the spaces like this where you get to meet people that you may have wanted to meet, or you get to see a name that you were hoping to connect with, and maybe you saw them in a breakout, or you'll see them in the next breakout. But those connections are all, I think, critical and help us kind of in a combined way marshal resources to support young people. We have, I think, a broad and inclusive definition of data and data collection, and understand that, as Paul mentioned, in some of our grants, there are different levels of expectation around grant, particularly the new program. We're not going to try to overwhelm you with lots of specific data that you need to report, but we know at a high level that quantitative data and qualitative data matter. And we want to hear not only how many young people you're serving, and whether you're serving 12 young people and that's your primary focus and you do that really well, or you're serving hundreds or thousands, that you're doing focused and important work. I don't make the decisions on grants. We have committees that do that, but we've seen over our history that we recognize the value of the small, if you will, or small community focused work with a dozen or a couple dozen young people and families, and also see real impact and success with those organizations that have the capacity to serve more. We value both and want you to share not just the quantitative data, but the qualitative information, the narrative stories of impact as a part of our data collection. And then ultimately thinking in I think a community-based way about what success looks like and what the outcomes are. you will see, and those who are grantees hopefully understand, we want you to have some definition of success and impact. And we're excited to kind of work with you to hear how you answer the question of what success looks like. And ultimately, when we've got all that information, we find that we're able to, help build that future for young people and create real impact for communities that lasts a while. So next slide. Paul, back to you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Brian. Oops, not going too far. I'm going to jump back to the survey results. And one of the things that we've heard in these presentations is people might be a little frustrated with me in the sense that you only get one of these choices. And we did that very purposely because we want to really understand the trends that we're seeing throughout. We recognize that many of these challenges and obstacles, you can probably check all the boxes. I see a few head nods with that comment but we want to understand how we best align our grants to really support the trends that are happening throughout the state. So you can see on the screen now, what is the biggest or most common challenge or obstacle preventing the youth you serve from achieving academic success? And one of the biggest categories there is the lack of positive role models, followed closely by that lack of stable housing or affordable housing. And I'd say the trend wise, as we've gone through the state, has been pretty consistent up there, is that people are looking for those really strong role models, but also the housing market is difficult right now. And we've heard lots of stories as we've traveled throughout that on the side. This data that I'm showing you now, we're using it in two ways. We are pulling it both for the community conversation. So obviously in this virtual one, it's a little bit different, but we're also going to be combining it and showing what we've seen for trends throughout the state at that follow-up, wrap-up conversation in January that Brian talked about earlier. We'll make sure to send that link to you or get that link to you here at the wrap-up of this meeting within that. So the next one down here is the community. Currently, what is the biggest challenge as a service provider? There's two obviously big areas that are being shown there with hiring challenges as well as stable funding sources. And I can pretty confidently say that has been a very consistent message with each of these surveys that we've seen with the hiring challenges. And the hiring challenges range from finding staff to be able to retain staff, as well as that stable funding has that impact on once you get staff in the room and serving them, how do you best serve them and keep them connected? So I'd like to note here, just one of the things that we have tried to do with both these community conversations, but also our process coming out in 2023-25, is that we've tried to get that process going earlier. And so we're looking to launch our RFAs for the next biennium here at the end of February, early March range, which hopefully will help positively impact each of you serving youth and with your staffing, in that you may not have to be able to say that we don't know if we have funding or not. Our intent is to get that intent to award out very close to that June 30, July 1 range, so that grantees know that they're at least going through the process of getting the grant awards on that. The next category that we had to provide some feedback on is what external challenges not addressed by your programming. So again, that affordable housing becomes one of those major factors that we're seeing both with this conversation, but also statewide. And then the access to ongoing mental health services has been a very consistent message throughout all of these conversations. And I think everybody's seeing increased needs for youth, and how do we help support them on that? And again, that the ongoing mental health services could be just access to it, but also just having staff or organizations in your community helping serve that along the way. And then the final question that we'll cover in this kind of update of the survey is, what single area of YDV grant processes would you like to see implemented? And so the largest area that we see here is explore extending funding cycles beyond the biennium, as well as then increase grant awards amount due to it. Inflation, as I believe what the rest of that says. So again, a very consistent message that we're hearing along the way. We want to, and you heard me say earlier that we haven't identified what the grant awards will be for the following biennium, and that is purposely done because of this feedback that we're getting. Because obviously that impact that if you increase grant awards with a set amount of funds, that means that we may not be able to fund as many organizations that to increase the awards to them to serve youth in a more expanded way. So we're wrestling with that question, and we want to see what the survey results come out prior to making that final determination within that. So Brian, I'm going to turn it back to you as I change slides and open it up for any questions as we transition back.
Thank you, Paul. And yeah, we've given you a lot of information here in this roughly first hour, and we're gonna kind of move to, I think, our breakout and more interactive session. Paul and I want to do a little introduction there, but I do want to pause and see if maybe in the chat, if there are any questions that have been left unanswered, and or if other YD staff may have been tracking something or saw something, just any input from other YDO folks that we may have missed or needs to be covered. Just leaving space there. And again, if you have, for participants, if there's a question, pop in the chat and we'll either answer it kind of as we're presenting, or we'll respond in writing. Okay. Oh, thanks, Cord, for that comment in the chat. I think that's some good context around the fact that we don't know what our overarching agency budget is going to be, and nor do we have know what our agency budget will be. So we are working on the process for our grant applications, and we'll get that released, I think, Paul, late winter, early spring. But once we have a clear picture, which may take several months, right, into the legislative session on our budget, then we'll be able to kind of set the grant, then the amounts in each grant area and the ranges of grants and the maximums and minimums. So a lot of that financial piece we're just not able to provide because we're still waiting on the governor's recommended budget, which will give us some indication of what the new governor or governor-elect Kotek wants to do. And then ultimately it's the legislature that decides the budget. So we don't know, that final piece until June. So bear with us. We're sharing information based on our current biennium. So just to have a little bit of sense of where we're at, but we won't have final numbers for a while. All right, so moving into this kind of interactive piece, we are interested in getting your feedback and your thoughts about the kind of broad areas of youth development. And we've broken those kind of, you might think of them as levels, I guess, or more, I heard this in a presentation lately, kind of the ecosystem of the work, and that ecosystem exists at this sort of individual level with individual youth. And so we're eager to hear perspectives, and we have some specific questions about youth that we can drive toward this goal of all youth having the opportunity to thrive and achieve their full potential. That ecosystem includes those programs, and many of whom are grantees, but not all, and how they operate and provide services using a positive youth development and like an equitable and community-based or community-focused approach, like based in what the needs and goals of a community are, or region, perhaps. That's an important element of the ecosystem. Community, just the population, the folks in community who are interested in seeing youth achieve their full potential and are trying to figure out ways that they should be engaged and thought of as an important element of this youth development work. And then the system, right? The system and the system players, whether it be law enforcement or juvenile justice or child welfare or foster care, right? Several systems, and that systemic level is really important to us to figure out ways that we can not just kind of meet immediate needs, but think more broadly to actually change the course for families and young people, and to do deeper systemic work that will lead to more sustainable impact and change. So be thinking about that level, and we'll have questions specific to that. Paul, do you want to just kind of jump to the process, and then we'll get to some breakouts?
Sounds good. So, it's always fun to learn in the virtual world of trying new things. So we're going to do a little bit of a semi-facilitated World Cafe. So we have hosts from our staff that will be in each of the rooms and working with you with some guiding questions, as Brian was talking about on it. The intent is that we were going to try to have a conversation around these 4 different areas that Brian just shared out. The hosts in each room are really just intended, they'll be taking some notes, and I believe all of us will be sharing our screens as we try to capture what you're saying in kind of a shorthand version, as well as then just using the guiding questions that we have for each of those 4 areas on that. What we'll do in process, well, actually, let me jump to the questions, then I'll talk about process. So you can see here, and these will be posted in your rooms, in your breakout rooms, but we have some guiding questions here, such as around youth. So what challenges or barriers are impacting youth in your community? We want to kind of have a conversation around what information does YDO need to know about your community and the youth that you're being served, and try to capture that along the way on it. I won't go through and read these questions because your hosts are going to be walking you through that process, but you can see we have the youth, the program. One thing about program, let me go back here, is that it does say, what's been the biggest impact from funding from us. If you don't have funding from us, please think about what the biggest impact could be if you're receiving funding from us along that work. Community, again, what do we need to know about your community? And lastly, that system change on that. So the process that we're going to be moving into, is Melissa's going to be breaking us out into 6 different breakout groups. I believe they're kind of randomly assigned. And then each of us will be each of the hosts will be walking you through these questions. So we'll spend 5 minutes on youth, if that's the group that your breakout room is starting on. And then after 5 minutes, Melissa will notify us, and then you'll stay with the same room host, but you'll switch topics. So your room host will be guiding you through that along the way. Looking on the screen, because I can see all of our hosts. Are there any questions? I believe we're using all 6 breakout rooms, correct, Melissa?
Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
All right. Room host, do you need anything from me before we cut you loose?
Just a quick question, Paul. So will we be getting notifications of the time checks in the rooms?
Yeah, I'll send out 5-minute notices to switch topics.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Also to note about format, so we are divided ourselves up as hosts. So I believe Cord will be starting on one topic, and then he'll switch to the other. You will see the notes from one of, if someone has already had that conversation along the way on that side. So there should be a lot happening on the screen if it all works. Fingers crossed, right? So we'll see how this goes.
You ready?
I believe so.
Am I ready? Let's see if we can open those breakout rooms. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, group. I know we got a little cut off there, but thanks for the contributions. We weren't watching the time, Melissa or Paul.
We didn't even get to the 4th one, so I'm like not a good example of that either. So I was not watching. So Brian, I lost the presentation. So if you want to just kind of summarize what we just did, and I'll pull that up and get my screen to share.
Yeah, great. Well, appreciate folks taking time in the breakouts. Yeah, I imagine the time was maybe a little short, which is not a bad thing, right? And we've been able to have 10 of these conversations. Now we're doing this virtually, a little slightly different format and some technical stuff obviously to work out. But we didn't necessarily get to all of the 4 areas, but kind of spent time in about 3 of them. And I think that was valuable, and tried to go to areas that we had commentary and thoughts. So that's sort of how we used our time. I think, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, I know you're jumping to the this back to the presentation, and somebody help me. Is it that we want to kind of quickly go around? We got 6 groups, so, and probably about 20 minutes left, really more like 15 minutes, but do we want to just share maybe a few highlights from our group and sort of from the facilitators, or maybe we didn't in our group pick somebody to report out, I will admit. But is that it, Paul? Do we want to do a quick share out?
Yes, and so I'll just call on the presenters, or sorry, the hosts, not the presenters, the hosts, to maybe do a quick share out. And Brian and I have been doing a lot of talking, obviously. So maybe I see Jared on the screen. Do you mind doing a quick share out? And if someone in his group and wants to add, that would be, I think, the kind of the best use of our time to jump in when Jared's on. Jared?
Sure. All right. Yeah, so we heard a lot of what's been coming up at the in-person sessions, lack of transportation, lack of access to mental health supports, the necessity of flexibility of funding. Let's see, we had that systems often don't communicate well together and are not aligned. So we need to think about how systems in the community can support each other better. And then also measuring success. One big thing that came up was was really considering that sometimes, you know, youth are not ready necessarily to participate to the fullest extent in programming until they have their basic needs met. So sometimes success might just look like, you know, this youth now is in a better place and they know where to go for services and know how to access help. And so numerically, it might not look like a success, but that there is success happening and that we shouldn't discount. So yeah, anybody else from that group have anything to add? All right.
And just a note, if you raise your hand and we're moving on, it's probably that we just can't see you on the screen. So please do unmute yourself, and if you're in that group on that side. So I think Bill, you're probably up next. I don't know where Bill is on my screen here.
Bill was having some tech issues popping in and out. So I'll do my best to summarize them if anyone else in Bill's group wants to jump in if I miss something. But we spent a long time talking about barriers to access. And one of the barriers we're seeing across our areas is housing instability and affordability, and then combining that with the fact that we can't safe shelter youth without parental consent causes some more barriers there. We talked about really defining success as meeting some of those basic needs and allowing youth to access those, and kind of attestation about where their needs are being met so that they can participate in youth services.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else from Bill's group that wants to jump in there? Jennifer, thanks for jumping right in. I cannot find Bill, so he must have lost his connection.
Jen, I just want to say, put your email in the chat, please.
Perfect.
Okay, no problem.
Cord must be assuming I was going to call on him because I saw him pop back on screen. So Cord?
I had a feeling. I had accidentally closed the file and had to quickly log back in and pull it up, but I've got it. I thought there's some really interesting themes to our conversation. We really started talking about just the need within communities. Just post, I don't know if we're still in the pandemic or not. I guess it depends who you talk to, but certainly we're in a different phase, and all the resources that were available early on to support families, that cliff has hit, and as families fall off the cliff, so do young people. A lot of discussion about the just basic needs and mental health issues emerging simultaneously, and in a couple of ways, just how important providing the supports for mental and emotional health is a prerequisite doing anything else, whether it's education or job training. I thought there was a really interesting conversation about just the fact that schools are the place where there is this huge need for mental health supports, but what schools are measured on is their academic performance. And there's this real tug of war between these priorities that there's a huge value in providing a lot of training around things like restorative justice and providing more mental health and behavioral health supports within schools, but there are not that commitment to resources, and the real pressure on schools is ultimately to continuously improve academic results. And you can't do that without addressing these other issues. And so that tension was something that I think folks really see, and I think that's true for anyone doing outcomes-based work right now. There was also some conversation about childcare. I thought a really interesting point about the need for childcare provision in educational facilities. Like how does the conversation between childcare and K-12 look? How can it be improved? There seems to be a disconnect, and kind of led to a question, something I saw years ago when I was working in an alternative school, was like a lot of youth leaving school in order to provide care for younger siblings, so their parents could work, for example. And I asked if that is something folks are seeing more of now, and anecdotally, that's something that folks see happening, or that just even participating in any kind of after-school programming isn't possible because of the need to provide childcare, because it's not something that's available, to sufficient degree. So just a lot of the challenges that programs are facing, that communities are facing, those were really some of the things we talked about. If anybody from my group wants to chime in with anything else, please do.
All right, thank you, Cord. Sally, it looks like you're up.
Yeah, so my group talked about a lot of those same issues, really touching on housing and how important housing stability is, combined with mental health care for youth to be able to engage in any of the programming that's offered. We also had a great conversation around some existing referral systems, and that those referral systems and the partnerships, especially around re-engagement and workforce readiness, that's really critical, hampered more than any other single thing by transportation and trying to get youth from one place to another to be able to receive services or to be able to engage in a paid work experience. And that the referral systems, though often great, can also lead to some amount of inequity and kind of how youth are treated when they come into a system from a specific referral area, and that's even greater for the LGBTQ plus community, really aiming that they have even less of a sense of belonging and even less of a sense of equitable treatment, sometimes because of the path that they've taken to get into a community college, was the example that was at play. So anything else from my group that they'd like to add?
I think you nailed it.
Thanks.
Sorry, too many screens. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add from your?
Yeah, no, maybe one or two things, and my group can chime in, because we did begin talking about challenges and many of the things that were mentioned. I think housing, access to mental health supports, and mental health professionals was highlighted. Interesting, I think in the Klamath Falls areas, there's some peer support workers who are now involved in the school system that are kind of helping to hopefully to address that, but that still there's a pretty big need that counselors can't fulfill. In the community one, we talked a fair amount of around like, how do you build a sense of belonging and sense of ownership and a sense of place for young people, and how important that when you build that sense of ownership and place and an ability for young people to like engage in some of the seemingly intractable problems around, say, climate change or food insecurity or food system challenges and agribusiness challenges, that actually builds, it builds that sense of belonging and ownership when they can truly engage on difficult topics. And they're not, sometimes in communities around Oregon, they're not able to engage, but if they were and are, it's an important way to build protective factors, which then can help address or mitigate some of those social, emotional, mental health needs. So that was one aspect of our conversation that I felt like, in our limited time that was interesting to highlight. But anything else from those who were in my group? And I think Molly was in there as well. So I don't know if there are other comments.
All right. So for my group, I think we talked a lot about the similar pieces that everybody's kind of shared. I think a couple things just to note that I noticed is we talked a lot about this connection with schools and the juvenile justice system and how that really needs to be expanded. And there's a lot of barriers currently in place with that. And then also around the services. So specifically around, youth being able to access mental health services or other services that are not involving their parents, right? Because that's a challenge, right? And some youth are probably pretty guarded in accessing that side, as well as the roles that school counselors and social workers that are working in schools vary so greatly between schools that also can create a challenge as you move around. But want to make sure that and that was just me looking at one screen. So want to see a thumbs up from one of my members, but anybody else from my group that wants to share out anything? All right. Well, we are getting close to kind of wrapping this up, and appreciate us, you guys joining in the breakout groups. It's obviously a lot different than having done this in person 10 times. So I will say 20 minutes seems to go faster virtually than it does in person. I don't know why, but not sure, Brian, how you feel on that one. Just
I think you're right, Paul. I think it does somehow go faster. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I was keeping track, and I'm not very good at keeping track of time, so that probably affects that too. But as we are coming to a close, just want to kind of point out, we have in that survey, we had the aspirations, concerns, and recommendations. And again, that's another area that we really want to gather the feedback. That's hard to present on the fly, so to speak. And so really what our intent is, with all of the information we've gathered from the breakout rooms, from the survey, is to condense all the information and look for those trends to better align our work, or to improve our work of grant making and technical assistance, as well as collaboration, to best support the communities in which that's there. So the aspirations, concerns, recommendations, some people don't like to type, oh, you are all on computers, not necessarily on your phone. So this, again, a shift from in person, but feel free to take some time and put that information in those areas. Those are open dialog boxes or text boxes for you to use. If you did close that survey, you can go back to our website and access that survey on there. Just skip those first few parts of that. We also didn't cover the counties, but that was just, we wanted to try to figure out where our reach was with the virtual aspect of it. Oops, let's see, there we go. So as we're just wrapping up, I'll turn it over to Brian to kind of close, but we wanted to just put on the screen really what we're hoping to do with the work that we've spent some time together. We're also very intrigued of getting feedback. In-person feedback is pretty straightforward, because you're standing there talking with the people, but people are still giving us feedback from the in-person stuff, but would like to learn about how this format worked for you all. So please do think about that. Brian, we have one other slide just to wrap up as we close, but want to turn it back to you if you want to say anything.
Well, just deep appreciation for your attendance. I see some nice comments in the chat. We are thinking about other ways to bring folks together. We've got, as Paul mentioned, through the re-engagement collaborative grants, I think there will be opportunities for organizations to gather around re-engagement and those opportunity youth or youth who become disconnected or are at risk of being disconnected. And so there's some opportunity coming around that. And as we just devise our sort of engagement strategy for the coming biennium, we want to think about ways to remain engaged with you all, whether it's a virtual, some, biannual virtual meeting, or, coming back and meeting with you in person. We don't want to over meeting, but we see when we're in person, and I see in the chat, the sort of value of folks coming together. And this was, 2 hours went by, I think, like a snap. So we appreciate your attendance and want to figure out ways that make a good use of your time to come together around youth development and around other topics, and then that become actionable, right? We just don't want to come around and talk and do nothing. So we'll give that some more thought. Your feedback, your aspirations, your concerns, your ideas around those things will be really helpful, and we'll begin to look at those and analyze them and figure out where we can implement. So thanks for the time. Yeah, another community kind of that wrap up session coming Tuesday, January 10th. That's going to be here before we know it. There's a link that Melissa just dropped in the chat. Thank you for dropping that in. Paul, thanks for moving to this slide. I know it's only a few days before more holiday time off, so taking the time on a day when probably a lot of the schools are out, and probably in most places, and folks are probably trying to do catch up and or just take some time with family and friends, that you took some time with us today is we really appreciate. So I don't know, Paul, anything else from you?
No, absolutely. I think you said it very well, Brian. I appreciate everybody's time. This community conversation, if you're not able to join the summary and next steps, we will be sending out a survey because we are interested in how we can continue these conversations moving forward. Probably not 11 in a month and a half, but or 2 months, but we do want to make sure that we continue this work, bringing people together and engaging along the way. So again, appreciate all the great comments in the chat. And just open up if anybody, YDD staff, had anything last to say. If not, I'm sure YDD staff, YDO staff will hang on the call, but I appreciate your time and go enjoy some lunch. Hopefully you guys get to do that.
Exactly. Thanks, everybody.